The next morning, Massey groggily woke up in bed. She looked around. Oh, my stomach hurts, and I have a terrible headache. Suddenly, a voice spoke up. You're awake, my drunken lady? Massey turned to look at her husband with a sheepish and guilty expression. He came closer. Yesterday was quite a sight. I didn't expect my wife to be such a heavy drinker. She tried to explain. No, it wasn't like that. Yesterday was the first time I drank alcohol. Then he placed a glass of water in her hand. Let me tell you something, Massey. If I ever see you passed out drunk among other men again, I'll make sure you can't walk for a while. Massey was stunned by his words. She felt a strange mix of awe and bewilderment. Why wasn't she afraid? He looked at her. Why are you so dazed? Do you know what I'm planning to do? Massey nervously turned away. I won't let it happen again. He lowered his head. You think right now. Kristen glanced at his wife. She was sitting on the bed, still not fully sober. I had the servants make some tea to help with the hangover. Drink it and rest. Massey, startled, whispered, Kristen, hi. At that moment, Kristen's demeanor turned fierce, like a black dragon on the hunt. I have some urgent matters to handle at the training grounds. I'll stop nagging tonight. Massey was bewildered. What did I just see? She buried her face in the bed due to the headache. At that moment, the servant brought in the herbal tea and informed her that the bath was ready. After changing, Massey went to the library. Ruth waved. Good morning, Lady Callip. Did you grow taller overnight? Massey blushed at this. She slammed the book on the table. If you remind a lady of her mistakes to embarrass her, that's very impolite. Ruth giggled. What kind of lady drinks half a bottle of wine? Massey stammered, lies. I couldn't have drunk that much wine. Ruth continued to tease, including the grape wine, it was quite a lot. Lord Knighton praised you endlessly, saying, look at Lady Callip drink and still stay sober, she must be a born drinker. Massey sat down, despairing, I wasn't sober. I had such a terrible headache this morning. Now I feel a bit better after drinking the herbal tea. He chuckled, there will surely be another chance to test your drinking capacity. Then he continued writing. Enough small talk. Have you read the book I gave you? Massey fumbled, that one, there's only one volume left. She bowed her head, sorry, I've been reading but, there are many parts one don't. I don't understand so. Ruth looked at her, hesitating, really? You've read more than I expected. Massey looked up, puzzled. Didn't he say I had to finish reading it by the next time? Ruth laughed, looking at the papers, write down the parts you don't understand separately. That way, I can explain based on what you've written here. Focus now. Massey, filled with determination, yes. They studied together from morning until evening. Ruth examined the papers, good job. I think you've got a clear understanding of this section now. She said hesitantly, Ruth, you seem very familiar with teaching, don't you? He asked, yes. She continued, there are many things I don't understand. Although it might be frustrating, you patiently explain everything to me. Ruth smiled and sighed, it's nothing, because you're a diligent student with strong willpower. He thought for a moment, then said, and also. Ruth looked out the window. Times like these remind me of the World Tower. Massey was curious, didn't you leave because you hated the World Tower? Ruth explained, I didn't hate the rules there, nor did I hate the tower itself. Hundreds of mages gather there, a place where everyone can sharpen their minds and techniques. The island of intellect and genius, the cradle of wizards. Ruth recounted nostalgically, there's no place like that anywhere in the world. Massey's eyes sparkled with hope as she looked at him, do all wizards study at the World Tower? He was speechless, you're studying magic here in Anaton, and you say that? Unless it's elemental magic, there's no need to study at the World Tower. Massey was puzzled, elemental magic? Ruth suddenly realized, I haven't explained this to you yet, have I? He scratched his head. I mentioned the elements within Manwha before, didn't I? Massey recalled, yes, that's water, earth, fire, light, and darkness. There are 6 elements. Ruth nodded, correct. These 6 elements are all equal. That is the stable state of mana. Elemental magic focuses on a single element within that mana accumulated in the body. Pure elemental magic is 10 times stronger than magic mixed with various elements. Massey was curious, how is that possible? Wouldn't having multiple elements be better? He sighed, do you remember the principle of casting magic? She recalled a bit about it and asked, so it disrupts the balance by putting magic into the natural state of mana? Ruth smiled, exactly. Magic is the act of creating a calculated discord in the natural world. Therefore, the more unstable the magic power, the stronger it is. For example, imagine there are 6 bricks here. If these bricks are laid out side by side, it's hard to disrupt them, right? But if these bricks are stacked into a tall tower, just one hit can topple them, correct? Massey responded, I understand a bit now. Because a wizard's magic goes against the laws of nature, the more it leans towards one element, the easier it is to break the natural balance of the world. Ruth laughed, exactly. He showed the mark on his wrist. This is the smart part. The magic required to form elemental magic can only be inscribed by high-level wizards who live at the top of the tower. With common magic, you can still become a wandering wizard working with mercenary groups. Massey looked at him with hopeful eyes. If I had this mark, would it be easier to learn magic? Ruth sighed, it's not that simple. This mark can't just be inscribed on anyone. To get this, I had to live at the World Tower, train for at least 3 years, and couldn't leave during that time. Naturally, a novice like you should focus on learning basic magic first. Massey was annoyed, I was just asking. Ruth immediately stood up, it's getting late. Let's end today's lesson here. Are you going to dine in the dining hall? She hesitated, well, about that. He teased, personally, I suggest you use this opportunity to break the ice with the knights. Everyone's still talking about the amusing events from last night. Massey swallowed her irritation and said irritably, I told you to forget about it. I don't want to be remembered as an amusing girl. At that moment, someone outside the door announced, the magic tool has been completed. Kristen, brimming with anger, stood outside and asked, what are you still doing here at this hour? He entered and said, the maids have been cooped up here since morning. Massey stammered, I was just about to leave. Meanwhile, Ruth nonchalantly replied, some people read books all day just like how you wield your sword all day. Kristen pulled her along, come, I've had dinner set up in our room. He replied, everyone's lounging around in their quarters. I ordered food to be brought to the soldiers pretending they couldn't move. Ruth shivered, what did you do to make everyone too exhausted to go to the dining hall? I just gave her a little wine. Isn't your reaction a bit excessive? Kristen smirked, I just disciplined them a bit. The sight of everyone getting tipsy seemed to undermine discipline. Then he hugged his wife, let's go, Massey. Massey turned her head and called out, I'll go ahead, Ruth. Ruth sighed, yes, be careful. As Kristen pulled her along the hallway, Massey called out, Kristen, wait. Are you still angry with me? I'm sorry. From now on, I won't drink that much again. I didn't realize I'd get that drunk. Kristen tightened his grip on her hand, when you're in the library, do you spend all that time with him? Massey, puzzled, stammered, yes, most of the time Ruth is in the study. I always run into him. His expression turned serious, does he bother you? Or do anything strange? Someone as sly as him could drag you into trouble. Massey quickly explained, no, he doesn't. If anyone's a bother, it's me. Ruth has taught me things I didn't know, and when I first arrived at the castle, he helped me with so many things. Kristen's face immediately grew stern. Massey noticed his sour expression and wondered, did I say something wrong? Why does he look so upset? Kristen hesitated before asking, Massey, do you like intelligent men? Massey was so shocked she froze. She quickly shouted, I don't like him. While it's true I respect him, it's not like what you're thinking. She continued, her voice trembling, I rely on him when I'm struggling because he knows so much, but he nags a lot. You're meddling too much. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't side with him. I'm only with you, Kristen. The hallway fell into silence. Massey thought to herself, oh no, what am I saying? How can I even face Kristen now? She stammered, if I had to say, the person I'd like is someone reliable, skilled at riding, and who treats me well, then I would say I like. Suddenly, when she turned around, she saw Kristen banging his head against the wall. She was bewildered. Kristen. He turned to look at his wife, exasperated, then hugged her waist. How strange do I have to act in this place? Kristen immediately threw his arms around her shoulders, ignoring her protests for him to stop. He picked her up and kissed her deeply. Massey panted heavily after he let go, and then Kristen kissed her even more passionately. Truly, people in love are always different. If they aren't embarrassed, someone else will be. Massey suddenly turned and saw several servants blushing furiously. She quickly covered her face. Kristen sternly ordered, if you're done, leave the room. The servants awkwardly bowed and left. He lifted her up. Massey, still too embarrassed to look, said, now, how can I face them again? Kristen sighed, it doesn't matter, they're just servants. She blushed deeper, you're rarely in the castle, but I'm with them every day. He teased, but you spend the most time with Ruth. Isn't that right? His words made her feel so embarrassed she wished she could disappear. Massey tried to explain, no, it's not like that. I spend most of my time with the maidservants. Kristen leaned down, no matter what, I'm your husband, but I spend the least time with you. Doesn't that seem unfair? Massey stammered, that's not your fault. Kristen took her hand, exactly, it's because I'm too busy. He kissed her hand. So, Massey, what I mean is that at least when you're with me, don't think about anyone else. She blushed, staring at her husband in bewilderment. Massey lowered her head, and the atmosphere grew silent again. She thought, it feels like there's a heartbeat at my fingertips. Every time he looks at me like that, it feels like all the words in the world disappear. Time passed quickly like a shuttle. Early in the morning, Kristen called her, sleep a bit more, Massey. She rubbed her eyes, no, I'm already up. He gently kissed her, but you look like you haven't had enough sleep. Massey couldn't help but gaze lovingly at her husband. The winter was long, and Kristen stayed at the castle longer. There are some things I can learn about him. First, he seems to have a rather simple taste. He likes wearing plain, sturdy clothes that are easy to move in and without any patterns. There's no way he would wear a brooch or any jewels. I don't think he's unfamiliar with luxury, but his simple tastes don't seem to apply to me. At this moment, a servant inquired, my lady, are you feeling unwell? A little while later, the servants prepared dresses for Massey. Choose this belt, Massey thought to herself. He always wants me to wear bright outfits and jewels, living lavishly served by the maids. All these things seem to hold great importance to him, as if his jealousy and contempt for the aristocracy coexist within him. The servant smiled, we will help you with your makeup after you finish bathing, my lady. Massey dressed in her luxurious attire and jewels, wondering if Kristen was pleased with how he had nurtured the Duke's daughter. I also want to meet his expectations. If possible, when spring comes, the nobles will visit Anatole. While the true noble ladies are full of grace, I am still clumsily imitating. Jetta, how long can I deceive him? I've never even learned how to host a banquet. Massey looked at her hand, I really. Suddenly, a noise startled her. Ruth spoke up, once you finish reading this book, you will have learned the basic theory. Please focus, my lady. If you want to learn any magic, you need a solid foundation in basic theory. You must try a little harder. Massey defended herself, I am trying. It's just that I'm a little tired. My lady, please have some tea. Massey gratefully accepted, thank you. Ruth looked at the cup set down with a thud on the table, annoyed. This is herbal tea with added ginger and honey, right? Not bad for weather like this. Rudy smiled at Massey, would you like some sweets as well, my lady? Meanwhile, Ruth stared at the spilled tea. Massey glanced at him, seeing Ruth calmly drinking tea and turning the pages of a book. She thought, since Kristen showed concern for Ruth, I always bring Rudy along when I go to the library. She awkwardly looked at the two of them, not understanding why they seem unhappy when they see each other. Ruth often speaks quite bluntly, which might be considered disrespectful to Rudy. He asked, "How's the manna perception training going?" Massey stammered, It's still not progressing particularly well." Ruth stroked his chin, "I didn't expect that. I thought you were born with a strong ability to absorb manna and would succeed right away." Massey suddenly looked puzzled. "My absorption ability is strong?" Ruth explained, "Last time, you saw my magic power being drawn into your palm. That means your ability to integrate and absorb manna is high. Usually, for a magic conduit to develop to that level, a mage has to put in a lot of effort from a young age." Massey, curious about this, said, "The magic conduit is the pathway in the body through which manna is integrated." She asked, "So, how do they normally develop?" Ruth replied, "A senior mage will regularly channel magic power into their disciple. If one is constantly exposed to magic from a young age, the magic conduit will naturally expand, allowing for better absorption." Hearing this, Massey's heart skipped a beat. Constant exposure to magic? Thinking about it, memories of harsh punishments flashed before her eyes. After those sessions, the mage would always heal her. So, is it because of the healing magic I received when I was young? Is this ability thanks to that? Ruth noticed her hands trembling and reassured her, "You don't need to worry so much." He looked intently at Massey. "If you keep practicing, it will only get better." Massey tried to smile, "Yes, that's right." She consoled herself, "Well, no matter how it started, it doesn't matter. Whether this ability is a talent or not, what's important is how to use it." Massey asked, "So, in this structure, if I change this part like this, what happens?" Ruth nodded, "You did it right. So now you've memorized it. Now, next." The lesson continued smoothly thanks to Massey's intelligence. At this moment, Ruth noticed Kristen standing at the library door and grumbling, "Of course, here you are." Massey jumped in surprise, "Kristen." Ruth sighed, "You finished your training already?" Kristen kissed her hair and replied, "Training for long periods in cold weather can reduce the soldiers' discipline, so I gave them a day off." He hesitated for a moment, "But you've been here since early morning, haven't you?" Massey explained, "This morning I went to the stables." He questioned, "You're not spending more time here than in my bed, are you?" Massey stammered, No, just enough." Kristen, a bit displeased, said, "I still think it's not enough." Ruth, annoyed, said, "Please, could you two show affection only when you're alone? At least, don't do it in front of me." Kristen immediately kissed Massey on the forehead and coldly replied, "Then just look away." Ruth grumbled, "You should go back to your room. At least have the decency to choose a more appropriate place." Kristen looked at his wife seriously and provocatively said, "Since you said that, let's go back to the room." "Come on, Massey." She was startled, wait a minute. "So, you're done with your work for today?" Kristen replied, "I assigned my patrol duties to another night." "Why aren't you getting up? What are you still doing?" Her face turned red from his insistence. Massey thought, "It's so embarrassing to be dragged to bed in broad daylight like this. If everyone finds out, what kind of rumors will spread among the servants?" Massey hurriedly used the book to cover her face, flustered, I haven't finished reading this book." Kristen questioned, "You can read it later." Massey remained adamant, "I plan to finish it today." He sighed at his wife, "What is so fascinating about that book?" Then suddenly, Kristen stared intently. He noticed a symbol on the book. On the other side of the table was a pile of books related to magic. "What is this? Are you trying to learn magic?" Ruth, surprised, said, "You didn't know? The lady has been learning magic from me for weeks now. She seems very talented, so I'm teaching her bit by bit." "Didn't she tell you?" Kristen immediately slammed the book on the table and glared at Ruth with a murderous look, under whose authority? Even Ruth was shocked by his anger, an attitude he had never seen before. Kristen shouted, "How could you not tell me anything?" Ruth explained, "Because at that time, you were conquering the goblin territory." Rudy then pulled Massey away, "My lady, please step back a bit." Massey couldn't understand, why is he so angry? Is it because I didn't tell him beforehand? But I just wasn't confident enough. If I could just perform a small magic spell, then I would have told him. A mage is a very useful resource, and I thought he would be pleased to know. Why is he like this? Ruth stood up calmly and replied, I'm not trying to teach her difficult magic. If the lady can perform simple defensive or healing magic, it will still be very helpful for Anatole. Kristen immediately shouted, I don't need any help. There. Then he looked at his wife with a terrifying gaze and snapped, Listen, Massey. I didn't bring you along expecting any help. I just want you to be comfortable. Magic is difficult and can unintentionally drain your strength. Massey lowered her head in shame, I didn't mean to do anything dangerous. I just wanted to help you. Kristen gritted his teeth with anger, his loud voice making the atmosphere around them cold. I said I don't need it. Then he paused, hesitated, No, Massey, I'm not against you, I just... He was about to embrace her shoulders but she pushed him away. In that moment, Kristen was taken aback as he saw Massey looking at him with a mix of horror and suspicion. He quickly withdrew his hand, furrowed his brow in anger, and left abruptly, Do whatever you want. Massey stood there, feeling the unprecedented chill from Kristen. Later on, she asked the steward about the Lord, and he replied, The Lord returned late in the afternoon, suddenly rode out of the castle without bringing any attendants. It seems something serious has happened. Massey worriedly bit her nails, turning back to her habitual self-doubt. She questioned herself, Is there something wrong? Do I need permission to learn magic? Does he think I'm arrogant for saying I want to help? Massey curled up on the bed, lonely and scared, but... She remembered his words, he hates liars and useless people. I see so many who have no right but still. But he really hates the useless, doesn't he? Thinking about this, tears continued to fall. In the dark of night, a large figure suddenly appeared in the room. It was Kristen. He silently stood beside the bed, silently wiping away her tears. Massey startled when she felt his hand, immediately grabbing him and calling out, Kristen. Massey tearfully looked at her returned husband. He too was moved to silence. Massey sobbed, I'm sorry, I was wrong, Her stuttering words made him lose patience, and he immediately embraced her. He whispered, Don't apologize. You've done nothing wrong. It's just... You can learn magic or anything else. Don't be afraid of me like that. Massey tried to explain, No, I'm not afraid of you. He looked at Massey, Don't lie, you're trembling, aren't you? Kristen frustratedly muttered, Damn it. It took me forever to make you smile, and now it's like we're back to square one. Massey tried to reassure him, I'm being honest, I'm not scared. She bowed her head, tears still streaming, You said I'm not needed so. Kristen quickly said, Massey, that's not it, I didn't mean that. She continued crying loudly, I just thought I wanted to help you, why is that a bother? Despite his reassurances, she kept crying uncontrollably, I just wanted to do something, so I thought it would be nice if I could. Kristen gritted his teeth and held her shoulders tightly, affirming, Even if you did nothing. Then he realized his behavior was still harsh. Kristen sighed in disappointment, then gently lifted and embraced his wife to comfort her. Tenderly, he reassured her, You can do whatever you want. So please, don't look at me like that. Massey lifted her tear-streaked face to look at him. She silently wondered, He says that, but why does he look at me like that? Kristen could turn away at any moment, and if one day he turns away coldly, I fear he'll never return. Her mind was blank as she held onto his hand, Your body is so cold, have you been outside for long? Kristen held her tightly, I just want to calm your mind for a moment. She hesitated, Is it because you're angry at me? He explained, No, Massey, it's just that Before he could finish, she touched him anxiously. Massey felt a surge of excitement from the effect she was having on Kristen, making him grip the bedsheet tightly. His strong physique and deep voice, someone stronger than anyone else in the world who could even decapitate a dragon, yet now Kristen bit his lip to keep from moaning. Why was such a person so restless in front of her gestures? How could they explode in her hands like this? Massey recalled the teachings she had received all along, a noblewoman must maintain purity, must always sit still like a dead mouse. And because of that, I didn't know. At this moment, Kristen gently lifted her face and sighed, Massey, how much do you want to make me crazy? In her heart, Massey secretly thought, I just want to tie this man tightly forever, so he can never abandon me, so he can never turn his back on me a second time and leave again. The two of them spent another passionate night together, more intense than ever before. As soon as Massey woke up, Kristen spoke up, it's still early, go back to sleep a little longer. She blinked sleepily, but... I want. Kristen pressed her shoulder gently, I told you to sleep a little longer. I said you can do whatever you want, but don't make that face. She hesitated, wanting to explain, but... Kristen turned away, why did you learn those meaningless spells? Even though I don't understand much, even learning defensive magic isn't a bad idea. He decisively stood up, but I won't let you end up in a situation where you have to use it directly, never.